Entitled mother wants her kid to drink underage and loses it when I say no. Boy, howdy do I have some entitled parent stories from when I worked in upscale restaurants. Diners? Parents behave and kids behave, or try to behave with their parents, encouraging good behavior. Kids get a pass for the odd poor manner here and there. But the bougier the restaurant, the more entitled the parents get. I had one case where the entitled dad was super angry because we didn't serve burgers, like, "Sir, this is a fancy Italian restaurant." So here I am at a different fancy Italian restaurant. I go up to the table, introduce myself, and asked if I could start them with some drinks. The mother said, "Oh, Kyle, honey, show the lady your ID so we can get some cocktails." A young man, who I would not guess is older than 16, hands me the most blatantly fake ID I've ever seen. Like, I don't know who this thing would fool. The photo was crooked and clearly pasted on and peeled off when I ran my thumb over it to reveal a totally different person, and the name on the ID was Amanda. So it's a very, very bad fake. I said, "I'm sorry, but do you have another form of ID? This isn't yours." The mother said, "What do you mean that isn't his? That's his ID." Well, I don't think he's a black female named Amanda, so no, this isn't his ID. And I can't serve anyone at the table alcohol now. It's the law. My manager overheard some of this and came over. "Is there a problem?" "She won't serve my son alcohol even though he showed her ID." At this, I handed my manager the fake ID. Ma'am, this is clearly a fake ID. By law, we can't serve anyone at this table alcohol." She lost her crap, jumped up, held a fork like she wanted to stab someone with it, and demanded to speak to the owner. The owner has heard the whole thing. He comes over and informs this woman that no, we won't be serving them alcohol and she can now leave, either via her own legs or with the cops, because we weren't serving them food either. Karen and co. decide that we're serious and they storm out, making a scene, ranting the whole way out the door. Other guests are staring and then go back to their food with a bout of uncomfortable giggles. I have so many other stories from this restaurant, this isn't even the worst one. To answer the questions I'm getting, this happened in a US state with really strict alcohol laws. If one person in a group attempts to obtain alcohol via duplicitous means, such as a fake ID, I can't serve anyone in the group alcohol. Welcome to the US. No booze till you're 21. And no, our bosses weren't always this great about sticking up for us. This was the one case in my career where they actually supported me. If they hadn't, we'd have lost our liquor license. He didn't ever back us up for crap otherwise. Also, if we made more than minimum wage on our tips, we were charged a fee to work there, so we didn't get our full paychecks. This was in the South. They honestly don't care when it's poor people suffering. Honestly, my bosses largely sucked. I hated waiting tables. Well, what a big bowl of jerk salad you found yourself stuck in there, author. I think the audacity of that fake ID is incredible, though. It's impressive to stick by your guns and insist that your 16-year-old son is a black woman called Amanda, so I can nearly commend her on committing to the bit, as it were. And don't scream at the staff who have to follow the law for fear of losing their jobs. Although this lady is clearly a sack of crap, I think your bosses come out worse. Imagine skimming your minimum wage workers' tips if they happen to do an exceptional job and have a lot of satisfied customers for the night. That is not how you retain employees, guys, just in case any of you were wondering. I'm just happy that it seems like the author got out of there in the end. We wish you a life free from exploitative restaurateurs and colorblind, genderblind, age-blind entitled parents who are willing to get into cutlery fights if you refuse to serve their younger offspring Long Island iced teas. Oh, I can't drive anywhere without permission? Alright, I'll follow that rule, maliciously. This happened when I was 16 years old and I just got my driver's license. My parents had me run to the store to pick up some groceries. I stopped by my friend's house on the way back home for maybe 5 minutes to show him that I got my license and I was out driving alone. It was a really fun moment in the life of a 16-year-old. My stepmom, Mary Ann, freaked out. "We did not give you permission to drive to Bill's house. We told you to go to the store and that's all." I told Mary Ann and my dad that they'd let me drive to Matt's house the day before, so I didn't think it was a big deal. They went all unreasonable and laid down the unbendable rule that set up the malicious compliance. You are not allowed to drive anywhere where we don't give you explicit permission to do so. Period. End of sentence. Just because you were allowed to do it previously does not ever give you permission another time. Ever. Fast forward 3 days later. My 13-year-old stepsister had been a jerk to me all day, and I'm sick of her BS. She goes quiet for about 30 minutes and then comes out all sticky sweet. "Hey Brian, it's time to take me to ballet." I've taken her to ballet 3 days a week since I got my license. It's basically one of my chores. But I see my opportunity to say screw you to all 3 of them at once. "Sorry, Tina, I'm not allowed to take you to ballet. My parents didn't tell me to take you, and I don't want to get in trouble." She screams, she cries, she begs, and she threatens. She calls her mum and leaves a message. She calls my dad and leaves a message. Just like Steve Miller says, time keeps on slipping into the future. I'm not sure I'm brave enough to hang on to the bitter end and actually go through with it. I'm shaking, but I know that I've got them dead to rights. No call back from the parents, and the clock goes on past the start of her class. My stepmom comes home and Tina runs to meet her. "Tina, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be at ballet." I hear Tina tell her rendition of the story, leaving out how awful she's been to me, and they go back and forth. Mary Ann comes pounding down the hall and yells, with God as my witness, "You just wait till your father gets home." I had to stifle a laugh because I never really believed people actually said that. An hour later, Dad came home and the 2 of them go running out to meet him and tell him how horrible I was. I wait in my room for the hammer to fall. About 10 minutes later, my dad calls down the hall, "Brian, would you please come down here and talk to us?" I go into the kitchen. "Well, Brian, you did it." "What do you mean, Dad?" "You got us all, and there's absolutely nothing we can do about it." "Okay, let's make this reasonable for everyone." And they did. They agreed that they were over the top. They recognized that Tina wasn't always very nice to me, and they spoke to her about that. I was allowed to have reasonable freedom if I was driving somewhere else, since I had good grades and had never been in trouble. I walked down the hall back to my room, my back to my parents, with the world's biggest grin on my face. Yep, this is a win for you, my friend. They'd set an unreasonable rule during an overreaction, and you called them out in a very effective way. And you were able to stick it to your sibling with complete parental sanction as well, which is a huge plus. It doesn't actually seem like anyone is all that bad in this story, to be honest. Your kid's stepsister is a kid and has her jerky status suspended until she eventually comes of an appropriate age to be judged as an adult. Your dad and stepmom majorly overreacted, but likely more out of protective instincts than anything else. And let's credit them. After some initial anger over your act of malicious compliance, they admitted fault and let you off the hook, and even fairly analyzing that your stepsister had been antagonizing you up to a point, causing you to act on it. It sounds like the conversation was measured and reasonable, and that your act of passive resistance worked out into something that was actually a more healthy environment for everyone. And as a major plus, you get to hear the Hollywood line of, "Just wait until your father comes home." So you can now submit your stepmom's Academy Award nomination. Positive outcomes for all. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Get mad at me when my apple tree doesn't produce enough apples? Oh, get ready to be big mad. In 2018, my husband and I bought my parents' house as our first home. Our very large yard came with 2 mature producing apple trees and 1 crabapple tree. Since my parents moved in 2006, an older gentleman has come by and picked the apples out of their tree to use as deer feed during hunting season. She told me as such and said he usually stopped by late summer to re-get permission for the year and check on the harvest. 2018 and 2019, it was great. He picked the apples on the tree and on the ground in a few hours and away they'd go. 2020 rolls around, our trees produced 1 apple on one and no more than 2 dozen on the other. My next-door neighbors, some good friends, asked to have what was up there to make some pies, so obviously I let them have them. The old dude rolls up in July on his John Deere lawn tractor and asks what happened to all of his apples. When I told him they just didn't produce this year, he went off. Went on about how that's how he makes his fun money in the fall, selling jams and pies at local farmers markets, and it's my fault he lost his income and blah blah blah. When I mentioned I was told he'd used the apples for hunting, he sputtered some more, shook his fist, and drove off. Now look, I honestly wouldn't have cared what he was using them for. I didn't want a cut, even if he was making a profit off them. I still don't care, to be honest. It was his entitlement that rubbed me the wrong way. So this spring, I cut down those fricking apple trees. Sucks to suck, butthole. Oh people, stop complaining, they were always going to come down. This just bumped up my timeline. In their place, I'm putting 2 non-fruit-bearing trees that I'll actually appreciate. Okay, to be fair, after I cut them down, my mum said these trees just kind of cycled like that pretty consistently when I brought up how few apples there were. Every 3 or 4 years, there was just a year where they didn't produce anything. My gosh, so many commenters are very angry about 2 horrible trees. I'm not losing literally anything by not having them. I'm very fine not having extra flares of my chronic pain because I don't want to have to deal with the extra work anymore. If I knew I had so many people wanting to help me with lawn care, tree harvesting, pruning, cleaning up rotten apples, among other things, I would have kept the damn things. Oh, but wait. You don't want to help me with the upkeep, you just want to complain that I didn't. Got it. And I'm planting new trees anyway. I gave the applewood to a family and friends who said it makes great fuel for a smoking barbecue. Then I put it on Facebook Marketplace saying, feel free to grab what you want, and after that the city picked it up to make it into mulch that citizens could pick up for free for their gardens. It all got used in some way. Haha! Take that, you old coot! Look, if you're going to take excess apples to make a profit off your neighbor's goodwill, you've got to either be completely inconspicuous about it and not tell them the moment you get flustered, or preferably, you should just admit it from the get-go. They probably wouldn't have cared, and you could just chuck them an apple pie every now and again to say thanks. Sounds like one heck of an entitled freebooter. And while we're throwing people on the proverbial jerk pile, let's hurl on all the ones who are giving the author crap about what they did with their own property. I'm willing to bet that half of the ones who got angry about her botanical free will don't have gardens to begin with, and don't understand that many such plants come and go when one is dressing the space around their house. When you run a garden where you literally let every plant go through its full life cycle, maybe you can throw a stone from your glass house. Although, I doubt you'll be able to get said stone through the thick tangle of weeds, apples, and overgrown bushes and apple trees, so good luck. Entitled parent stops woman on crutches getting in elevator. This is my first time posting a story like this, so bear with me. I've always wondered if I'd ever see something awful enough to post on here, and this happened a couple of weeks ago. So me, a 20-year-old male, was in Primark at the time, which is a well-known clothing outlet in the UK for people who can't afford to fork out on big clothing brands. I was wandering around the men's section on the second floor, where there's a busy escalator one side of the shop and a lift on the other. As I got closer to the lifts, I heard raised voices and went over to look, because I'm nosy. There was a white woman in her 20s standing in the open lift. She had a child in a pram with her. Let's call her Karen. In the doorway of the lift was an older black woman around 50, who clearly had an issue with her leg and was using crutches and one of those boots they use for stuff like broken legs. Let's call her Jane. With Jane was a younger black man, maybe in his late 20s, but I'm not sure he said anything during the entire encounter. I'm making race relevant because I'm not entirely sure Karen's actions weren't entirely free of prejudice. So Karen was in the lift with her pram angled to stop Jane getting in as well. And the lift was definitely big enough for more than 3 people and a pram. In a raised voice, she was telling Jane, "I'm claustrophobic, I can't have anyone in the lift with me." Jane was asking if Karen could please just let her into the very big lift so that she didn't have to wait for it to go and come back. Karen wasn't having any of it and just kept repeating, "I'm claustrophobic," line over and told Jane to use the escalator instead. Jane gestured towards her leg and crutches and asked whether Karen did this in all lifts because there's no way she could get away with doing that every time someone got into a lift with her. When Jane started calling Karen out on this, Karen's story quickly changed to, "With everything going on, I'm worried about getting COVID," she said, without a mask on, to a woman wearing a mask while stood in an extremely busy shop. By this point, it would have been quicker for them to go down and send the lift back up one at a time. I'd also like to point out that this was the second floor. Even if she'd had claustrophobia, they would have been in the lift together for less than 10 seconds total. Karen started shouting, "How do I know you don't have COVID?" And Jane responds with a very calm, "How do I know you don't have COVID?" So Karen yelled, "How do I know your leg is actually broken?" Weird turn, lady. By this point, there were about 10 people, including me, pretending to look through clothes racks whilst we all stared at what was going on. It's rude to stare, so you have to be polite when watching the drama. Finally, about 3 different staff members appeared, about 5 minutes after the commotion had started, and they asked the women to take 2 separate lift trips. They let Karen go down first because she was already in the lift. Shame. There was a mutual look of everyone around shaking their heads when the woman with the pram left, and the people talking to the woman in crutches afterwards about how ridiculous the Karen was. I heard Jane saying to the Karen as she left and to the staff members, "This is how it's going to be for a long time. She needs to get used to it." I imagine this was relating to the pandemic and sharing spaces again. I wish something more had been done, but people kick off so much around here that you just kind of want them to get what they want and leave ASAP. Everyone went back to shopping after the women were split up, but I remember making eye contact with a maybe 16-year-old boy who was also watching, and we just burst out laughing in the middle of the shop. So this wasn't all that exciting, but I got a huge laugh out of it for a few days. You know, I didn't expect this to turn into a "screw you for not doing anything" kind of thing. If some of you are confident enough to stand up for someone every time you see something happen, good for you. Well done. But some of us don't have the confidence or social skills to do that constantly. This shouldn't be a "F you for doing nothing" thread. I really do understand where you're coming from, and I do wish I could do things like this, but those of you saying these things need to consider that you have a certain privilege in helping others. Love that you're doing it, or at least saying you'd do it, but as a feminine, trans-mask gay covered in trans rights badges with horrible social skills, I'm putting myself at risk just walking around sometimes. Yes, I should have intervened. Yes, I wish I did. But not everyone has the ability or the safety needed to do this. Yep, this all sounds shifty as heck. If you're not willing to share a lift for mere seconds, but can have a 10-minute argument with everyone in a department store face to face, there's absolutely something going on here. I'm going to side with the author against all of their critics. Not everyone can be Batman in every social situation, and I personally would be terrified of white knighting for someone who was more than capable of fighting their own battles, especially in such a public setting. But yeah, worrying about these kinds of things can often stop people who actually need help from getting it, so it might just be a perspective thing. And yes, obviously we can't prove that any of Karen's little stand was innately down to bigotry, but I just don't think I've ever seen anything like this going down in real life due to claustrophobia alone, and it feels like there's something deeper going on here. So the jerkhood is almost certainly on our Karen, if not for racial reasons, then for just being so cray-cray and inconveniencing everyone else, specifically an injured person. When moms go on strike. This happened in 1967 or 68. When I was a baby, my mother was home full-time with me and 3 siblings, under the age of 6. According to my mother, one day my father comes home and is mad because dinner isn't ready and waiting for him. Mom tells him that she's been busy and it'll be ready soon. Dad says he doesn't know why she couldn't do it sooner. And here's his mistake, because it's not like she's been doing anything all day but sitting around babysitting. Oh, you foolish, foolish man. Game on. My mum decides that she'll show him what life is like when she sits around all day, doing nothing. For the next few days, Mum lets the kids run wild. She picks up nothing, doesn't tell the kids to pick up anything themselves, and she doesn't stop the kids from getting into anything. Mum said she just sat around and made sure no one was doing anything dangerous. She didn't clean, do laundry, anything. But dinner was waiting. After several days of a hot mess at home, my father couldn't take it. He apologized and admitted he was wrong. Quite a milestone in our family. Dad was not known for admitting he was wrong or apologizing. Mum 1, Dad 0. I can't imagine any of my brothers acting this way in the modern day. All of them are perfectly capable of cooking and cleaning for their families. I do think times and most families have changed since the 1960s. To be fair, my parents did split a few years after that incident. My dad was very old-fashioned and misogynistic in his thinking. When I graduated college, his first thought was, "Oh good, now you can get married." So yeah, he was a bit better by the time I graduated law school. At least he congratulated me and said he was proud of me. I still wasn't married, but he knew better than to mention it that time. Clear-cut case of jerkiness on your father's part here, my good author. Sounds like a bumpy road all told, but it seems like at least he was capable of apologizing and learning in some small ways, even if you've implied that he never quite became a model of perfect fatherly behavior. There are other people who never even learned as well as he did, so we can give him the tiniest benefit of the doubt based on his age and generation, even if he wasn't great. Your mother, though, is an absolute champion for sticking to her guns and making a point. And it sounds like you and your brother have all benefited from the example she set. And in case anyone is unclear, looking after your kids isn't babysitting, it's parenting. Don't belittle it. Well done to everyone involved. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories. Or if you want to check out some great music, check out easymode.com. If you like Am I the Jerk, give Am I the Genius a shot. Everything linked in the description.